Hi and welcome. My name is Rob Scott from UC Today, and welcome to another Microsoft Teams News Monthly update. So, just before we get started, wanted to give Ribbon Communications a quick shout out for sponsoring today's edition. So, today I'm joined by Tom Arbuthnot, UC Solutions Architect, Microsoft Certified Master and MVP. Good to see you again, Tom. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Rob. Yeah. It's staying busy, but can't complain at that.
Good, good. Well, it's been a very, very interesting month on the Microsoft front again. So, keen to get straight into it, really, Tom. So, what's top of the list for you this month?
Yeah, like you say, there's been loads this month. So we had the end of July. We had the Microsoft Partner Conference, so MS Inspire. So lots of stuff came out from that, and before that, we had some big updates as well. So number one on the list is Microsoft adding calling plans to their high-level E5 SKU. So that's a little bit Microsoft gibberish, but what that means is E5, which is their top tier bundled SKU of all things, they're adding in Microsoft calling plans, which is calling minutes and phone numbers for users in 8 countries where Microsoft are a legit telco with no additional costs. So basically, if you're in those countries and you have or you buy E5, you'll now get user phone numbers and user minutes to make calls inclusive of your bundle of features and abilities.
Wow, and how's the community responded to that? What's the word on the street?
Yeah, it's really interesting because obviously it's a huge value for customers. So like customers don't pay any more and suddenly get PSTN minutes and phone numbers in those countries. So lots of customers very excited about potentially saving costs there. From an industry perspective, it obviously treads on the toes of traditional carriers and third parties trying to make money out of minutes. So they're probably less excited that Microsoft are just bundling that in. It is only 8 countries because Microsoft are only a telco in certain countries, and actually they're a telco in the US and Puerto Rico, but they've excluded US and Puerto Rico for the minute. So it's Belgium, Canada, France, Germany, Ireland, Netherlands, Spain, and the UK. So
Wow.
not small markets, and quite a big value proposition. I mean, we have customers with thousands and tens of thousands of E5 licenses who have suddenly just unlocked free telco basically in those countries.
So, what's the thought process then? What's the I know I get the gain for the customer, but what's in it for Microsoft?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I guess that the competition is heating up in this space, and if you go to other UCaaS providers, they will obviously give phone numbers and minutes by default because that's their primary thing. So if you compare Teams to Zoom Phone or Teams to some of the Cisco options, they'll be like, well, yeah, we do minutes and phone numbers included. So maybe there's a bit of that pressure. But also, I think the reality of PSTN minutes is, certainly my experience is, they're massively on the down. Like everybody does meetings, they don't do direct calling so much anymore in knowledge work because you schedule your diary and you schedule a meeting. So actually, if you look at the exposure to Microsoft, I mean, I probably make like 4 or 5 PSTN calls a month on my calling plan. I don't make a lot. Everything is a meeting. So I think the value they give is quite high, but the per minute exposure in terms of cost is probably not huge.
Mhm. Yeah, but again, makes it nice and sticky, I suppose, for Microsoft and protects that customer base.
Yeah, and they spend all that money licensing themselves as a telco and setting up the infrastructure and everything else. They've got that ability there. They've always been able to sell it. It's always been an add-on, but now it's just part of the core offer, which is nice.
Interesting to see whether the MetaSwitch acquisition plays into that strategy too, going forward. So,
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I mean, that's happened so recently. It probably, things move slow. It probably hasn't directly impacted it, but definitely Microsoft being a telco and owning a really good SBC in-house now, clearly on some trajectory, those two things maybe come together. I don't know.
absolutely. So, they've given away with one hand and maybe taken on the other. Microsoft have released an advanced communications license. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, this is also massively interesting. So this is really recent news. Microsoft have had a new license called Advanced Communications, and what it boils down to is an add-on SKU. So we just talked about E5 being the bundle, the high-level bundle of everything from Microsoft. This won't be included in that. This will be an additional extra at any level, and it unlocks a whole bunch of abilities. And unlocks is an interesting phrase because maybe you would have considered these previously to be features you'd expect to be in the bundle. So the features are access to the compliance recording API. So that is the API that gives you the ability to then have a third-party compliance record your calls. Access to the contact center API, and that's the API that lets a contact center vendor come in and connect and do clever interop with Teams. Live events for up to 20,000 participants. 1,000 participant Teams interactive meetings are coming later, large overflow meetings are coming later, and customizing your lobby and meeting experience. So an interesting mix of like niche compliance and contact center requirements where some users will need that feature, and some kind of nice large meeting, customize your lobby type features all bundled into one license. And that license is listing at $12 per user per month.
Ooh, so a clever move from Microsoft, really licensing and charging for those APIs where everyone's been developing their software to use those APIs. So new margin, new revenue available to Microsoft there, but effectively the APIs are being licensed. So
yeah, and a real risk to stunting growth in those areas, I think, because like that $12 per user per month, that's list, so big customers won't pay that, they'll pay something lower, but that is real money adding to. So anybody in FinServe that needs recording, which is basically all the financial services, if they were going down the Microsoft Teams route, they would pay for Microsoft Teams phone system, they would pay for their recording plans and their conferencing, and they would pay for a Verint or a Mnemonics or an Audio Codes or somebody else to be their recording platform, because there's no native compliance recording. But now they also have this levy of $12 per user per month to unlock the API to allow the third-party product to work. So I think this will definitely ruffle some feathers around, well, hang on a minute, I'm paying for the phone system, and I'm paying for the third party, and I'm paying to unlock the ability for the third party to connect to you now.
yeah, and as we went through in previous sessions, that there's great value in those APIs. Having a natively integrated solution for call recording, for example, you get a lot more, don't you? So it's a fairly classic Microsoft play, I think. But be interesting to see what the market, what the business world think about that. So if you've got a comment, do fire it into the comments or leave a note on social. So
yeah, really interested to hear people's thoughts on this, particularly if you've been impacted by it. Like if you're going down a full global Microsoft Teams strategy, that does having an API cost for contact center and compliance recording impact your strategy?
Absolutely. So now on to a more interesting one for me, because I was really excited by this. I've got a whole host of new features, working from home features in particular, which is absolutely spot on for today's world. Tell us about those features. Give us the headlines.
Yeah, this was like the mother load of features that dropped. So these dropped mid-July announcements, and there were 14 new features that we hadn't heard about before that got announced. So the headline ones and really the Microsoft messaging is all about with COVID and everybody working from home, we've learned a lot about meetings. Like we think we can do a better job of dealing with like Zoom fatigue and meeting fatigue and experience. So lots of them are focused around, obviously that's the current market messaging as well around that. The most interesting one is together mode. And that's a way to essentially cut individuals' videos out and put them all on the same background canvas. So think of virtually seating everybody in a coffee shop or an auditorium or a meeting. And Microsoft's testing suggests that helps with you presenting. For example, if you see your audience all sitting on like virtual seats, it feels a bit more normal to your brain than the classic like 3x3, 6x6, 9x9 kind of squares layout. So that's quite interesting, and apparently it makes people feel more interactive to see everybody in the same space.
Yeah, there's a lot of psychology going into this, isn't there? And science. It's really interesting about human behavior, and I mean, it made me laugh. I love the look of it. But what I think it was one of the analysts, I won't mention his name on this video, but he said it looked like something from the Muppet Show. But it was, I can't wait to see it actually work. When are we going to get together mode?
Yeah, I think that's rolling out August actually. It's definitely in tap now. We started to use it internally, and it's interesting. I think it's probably novelty, to be honest. We'll see if it sticks, but it's very, very clever that the ability to dynamically take people out of the single space and put them all on the same canvas.
Again, Microsoft flexing their muscles a little bit there, aren't they? Because they are showing the market that there's a world beyond your classic grid view, active speaker kind of video conferencing.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and starting to drop features that are not just catching up with Zoom, like some of the other features. So the next feature is large gallery view, the 16 people, 25 people, 49 people, like that stuff Zoom has had before. But also with that announcement, they announced the thing called dynamic stage, which is I think is much more powerful actually. The together mode got all the press because it was crazy and new, but dynamic stage is the ability to take layouts and intelligently think about how they're laid out relative to who's speaking. So relative to who's active and who's inactive, these are the 6 people that are most active. I'll give them big video and give the remaining 20 people small video, or I'll give these 5 people video on the left and I'll put the content on the right. So it's cleverly setting up the stage, if you like, for relative to what's going on, how should I lay out the video, not just the classic layout.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I know they're accelerating their roadmaps, especially Microsoft. They accelerated and don't seem to have ever stopped. But it's great to see real innovation in this space and just pushing the envelope on the technology all the time. So it's great to see. Any other kind of headlines in that kind of whole list of features?
Yeah, I mean, just running through them quickly. So video filtering, so dynamic filters to improve video quality, doing that for you basically. Live captions now have speaker attribution, so it says Tom is saying this or Sam is saying this, whereas before you had to watch who was speaking while the subtitles came up, which isn't very practical. Live in-meeting transcription of the meeting content, so as you're talking, it will say who's speaking and do a transcription for you to check during the meeting and after. Instagram-y type reactions in meetings, which is interesting. Again, very consumer focused, is being able to press smileys and claps and things and have them float up in the meeting so you can get some kind of interactive response. That was another one of those things from the study, said it's very hard to present to a room full of video without any understanding of if people care or not, and reactions can really help with that.
Yeah, I really like that feature. I like it because it's fun, but I like it because you can really feel the sentiment of the room. Yeah.
Me too, massively. I do a lot of presenting, and like it can feel like you're just talking to an abyss. So seeing somebody like engage in that way, and people don't want to interrupt you to like engage, so giving them ability to engage dynamically without interrupting you is fantastic. Well, the last kind of big items were mobile remote control for Microsoft Teams rooms and collab bars. So obviously lots of people are returning to the office, to the workplace, and want to minimize touch. So Microsoft are baking into the Teams client a remote control, so you can use your personal mobile to start a meeting, turn the volume up, down, mic mute, present, etc., which I think is super smart. And again, this is kind of like speed of Microsoft and value of software. Like a traditional hardware meeting room wouldn't have been built to do that, and you can't decide to change your roadmap within 60-90 days and just say we'll build this now. With software based stuff, you can be like, well, we've got a mobile app, we've got a Windows PC, this isn't very difficult to bring these two things together, so nice to see that. And then last one is Cortana being baked in. At the moment, this is US only, but Cortana will be baked into the meeting rooms and the mobile app. So again, minimizing touch, you'll be able to just say to the meeting room, join the meeting, mute the meeting, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I saw that, and potentially a big competitor for Cisco's Webex assistant, which is kind of really the only one in the meeting room that's really doing the do, if you know what I mean. So it'll be interesting to see that come into play.
Definitely, definitely, and it's a really good feature. The kind of star that hangs above that feature as a watch out is US only, and Cortana's only available in certain countries. So Microsoft has said they're trying to work out how they get that as a more global feature. But I struggle in big enterprise how you could train users to be like, in this country you can say start meeting, but in this country you can't. That's a tough one to deal with from a training perspective. But the mobile remote is completely global, so that's an easier option to train on.
Yeah, no, good point though. Well, yeah, good point for raising that. So loads of features, but there's another one, maybe another couple of features lined up. So stay tuned, Tom. Let's talk about the new Microsoft Teams displays.
Yeah, this is really a brand new device, and so again, kind of maybe a reaction to more home working. So this is a all-in-one dedicated Microsoft Teams device. We've sort of seen this before. Lenovo have a Think Smart View, which is a Google Home slash kind of Amazon Echo type device. So a screen, a mic, a speakers, a camera. At the moment, the Think Smart View is really just an IP phone. Like, it runs exactly the same software as the IP phones. But what Microsoft announced is a whole set of new software that will come in September, and the device from Yealink and other vendors may follow, which makes it into much more of a companion device with your calendar on it, and it can show presentations and it can engage in kind of new ways beyond just being an IP phone. So I think this is interesting because at the price, which is kind of around $300, and probably will get more aggressive as it gets more competitive, you can have a standalone unit that does voice, video, and interaction that's separate to your laptop. So it's a permanent station for that kind of interaction. I've heard people asking for that kind of thing.
Yeah, there are use cases for that. Certainly, isn't there? There's always a place that you need to enable with voice and video. Well, certainly traditionally voice, but now adding that video into the mix just makes sense. So, from a home working point of view, it's not completely dropped with me in terms of having that additional device on the desk.
I think it's niche. It's definitely not mainstream. Like if you've got a laptop can do everything this can do and more. But we do see lots of cases. For example, if you're working from home in a permanent space, but you maybe don't leave, like I leave my PC on 24/7, it sleeps, I bring it back up and I'm in. But maybe that's a shared space, but you need to join a 9 o'clock conference call. Like having a device ready to go that's always on, that only does one thing, that doesn't do Windows patching, that doesn't need 5 minutes to boot up because security have ruined the experience. Like that's the use case, I think, potentially.
Absolutely. So it'd be interesting to see, because we're seeing that from other brands as well. We're seeing more of these kind of display devices, video endpoint devices coming through. So it'd be very interesting to see whether the market responds positively to that type of device. Next on the list, let's talk about Cisco, because Cisco and Microsoft have done something recently too, haven't they?
Yeah, so this is the continued nice relationship between Cisco and Microsoft. So last month we talked about Cisco certifying their session border controllers to work with Teams. So if you're a Cisco networking shop, you can certify your device to work with Teams. This is reciprocal the other way. So Microsoft Teams rooms, the Microsoft meeting room experience, can now click and join Webex meetings. This software just dropped a few days ago, and it adds that feature. And literally, they show up in the calendar on the meeting room. You click to join. It's a slick experience.
That's very cool, and hats off to Cisco and Microsoft for continuing to interoperate, because we're just seeing it more and more now, aren't we? And this is fantastic to see that we are truly collaborating.
Yeah, there's been voice for this for years. Like even if your internal org standardizes on Cisco or standardizes on Microsoft or any other Zoom, the reality is you have to join external meetings. So buying into a room system that only does one platform is not super useful. And this is also coming for Zoom as well. So Zoom will be able to join Teams meetings and Teams will be able to join Zoom meetings. But it's nice to see the big industry players kind of being realistic about, let's try and give the best experience. Like, it is not a mono platform culture for meetings, for sure.
And there's one brand that isn't playing nicely with Microsoft.
Yeah, quite a contrast, isn't it?
Yeah, and for our final, news update or news story, it's a big one, I think, isn't it, Tom? Let's talk about Slack, who's really kind of just taken off the gloves with Microsoft again, with their latest action against Microsoft. So tell us more about that.
Yeah. So Slack have raised an official complaint with the EU about kind of the anti-competitiveness of having Teams be part of the Stack play from Microsoft. So it's an interesting and touchy conversation. Obviously, Slack came out of the gates when Teams came out 3 years ago, saying, "Yeah, that's nice, Microsoft. Nice to see you trying. Like we've got this." And kind of years later, Slack are kind of saying almost the opposite. Like we really have no ability to compete if Microsoft have something in the box that is similar. Microsoft have already said back, I think, they've seen massive growth because Teams is not Slack. Teams is app integration, meetings, phone system, a platform for development. Like it's a superset of features, not just collaborative workspace and new ways of working. So we'll see how that goes, but it's an interesting industry topic to see whether kind of the niche feature players are annoyed by Microsoft increasingly having a proposition that covers email and files and meetings and collaborative workspaces and security features. It's not just relevant for UC. Security vendors could say the same thing, or Box and Dropbox could say the same thing. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because Slack obviously has been a great team collaboration application. The pioneer of team apps, really.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's fair to say they really mainstreamed the thinking around it.
But everyone else has jumped on board, and it seems that one thing they do very well is the integrations, and no one can really touch them on that. They're doing fantastically well from that perspective. But that battle is being recognised more and more, isn't it? And hence why I've got my Star Wars background on today, because it really feels like a bit of a battleground out there amongst these providers. But Slack has a newfound relationship, hasn't it, with Amazon? So it's interesting. I wonder whether they're having conversations around the table and wondering, is there something we can do about this? Because Microsoft are really dominating the industry, and they have virtually everything in their kit bag now.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to compete, isn't it, when it's so nicely integrated because it's from the same vendor. You as a competitor have to be that much better, like to justify the additional cost. And I think Slack, early on, had a lot of innovation, had a lot of features, but you see Microsoft just plowing feature after feature after feature into Teams. It's getting much more aggressive than it used to be.
It'll be interesting to see how that plays out, but we'll keep you updated. So stay tuned
Definitely.
for more on the Slack Microsoft stories. Hey, Tom, it's always been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks again for joining me today and sharing another fantastic Microsoft Teams news update. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. If you've enjoyed today's session, please do give us a like or a share on social media. And if you want more Microsoft Teams news, please visit tomtalks.blog. We'll be back again this time next month. Thanks again for watching.
Great. Thanks, everybody.